Hey Nick, when I'm talking, can you hear that fan running? I mean, I can turn it off. You good? Okay, thank you. Nick, is Kathy on this call?
I don't see her on yet.
Okay, but she's planning on coming?
Yes.
All right, thank you. Say, someone's got some background noise. He says as the background noise continues.
I think you're not muted.
This conference will now be recorded.
All right, it is 6 p.m. We'll open up the meeting of the Joint Village Board and Plan Commission, Historic Preservation Commission of Wednesday, August 26, 2020. I'll remind you to keep your phones on mute unless you are talking. Call to order, and then roll call, please, for the Village Board.
Please respond here after your name is called. Village Board members, Randy Little.
Here.
Aaron Bainan. Brian Suzuki.
Here.
Jason Fendrick.
Here.
Beth Hill. Here. Jessica Jackson. Kathy Scott.
Here. All right,
Okay.
and I do believe we have a quorum, so let's do the roll call for the Plan Commission.
Okay. Plan Commission members, Randy Little and Aaron Bainan are already confirmed as present. Dave Hoffman.
Here.
Destiny Udehoven. Here. Brent Yakler. Peggy Zaluka. Here. And we already know that Norb Scribner is absent.
Correct. All right, thank you. We'll go to item 2, the joint discussion regarding extraterritorial zoning in the town of Blue Mounds. Nick, I will start with you.
Sounds good. Thank you, Randy. I also have Village Attorney Brian Kleinmeyer on the call and Village Planner Mike Slavny on as well in case there's questions for them. Basically, I talked about it in my notes, but we're interested in working with the town of Blue Mounds to kind of jointly plan the border of the village and the town. We approached them about a boundary agreement a while back. They were not interested for various reasons. So we saw this as kind of the only way to make that happen. If adopted, this ordinance would free zoning within the extraterritorial area, which is 1.5 miles of the village limits, and give us an opportunity to work with the town to jointly plan for how the village is going to grow, where we won't grow, and that kind of thing. It's a fairly straightforward process. I believe the initial term is for 2 years, and it can be extended for a year.
All right, does anyone have any comments?
I have a question for Nick. Today. I just want to make sure that I understand. Right now, we have comment ability for extraterritorial, right?
Correct, yep.
But no real zoning ability. So this would give us zoning ability as well. Is that correct?
That's correct. We would work with the town of Blue Mounds to come up with a mutually agreeable zoning for the areas surrounding the village.
Thank you, Nick.
This is Jason. This is Jason Fendrick. I've got a question for Brian. Brian, could you tell us why, as a village, we would not want to enact these ordinances tonight?
Sure. I would say if Nick had not already reached out to the town to try to start, let me step back. If there was still the possibility that we could just sit down with them and start working on a boundary agreement, I think that you might want to pause this type of process. I mean, my experience, I work with Mount Horeb, obviously. I work with Verona, and I work with Wanakee. Wanakee and one of its towns, Westport, have a long-standing boundary agreements. The city of Verona and the town of Verona have a boundary agreement. So I think that that's the preference to move through is with boundary agreements between villages and towns. As Nick indicated, my understanding is that the village has reached out to the town and at least initially was informed that the town was not interested in a boundary agreement. So this is certainly a step that a village or city can take in that direction. It doesn't modify any of the zoning in the town that would be within the extraterritorial zoning, so it doesn't negatively impact those property owners. It's basically a first step, I think, in trying to either reach a boundary agreement or trying to reach, as Nick had indicated, some joint zoning through a joint zoning committee. So because we've already reached out to try to see if we can get a boundary agreement, and thus far have not been successful, and because I don't think that there's a truly negative impact on the property owners, I don't think that there's any reason why you wouldn't want to pursue this.
Okay, thank you.
Thanks, Brian. Other comments?
This seems to sort of indicate that the village authority supersedes the town. Is that the case in these kind of instances?
You want me to answer that, Nick?
Yeah, please.
Well, essentially what this, I mean, within the extraterritorial zoning area, the zoning for the existing zoning for the land that is in the town is frozen. Now, if you look at the zoning ordinance itself, and I think that is on page, maybe page, pages, it's the second document within the packet. There is the ability for, if they work through the village to try to get some zoning changed, but really the purpose for this is to try to have the town and the village come together through a joint zoning committee. So if the Plan Commission makes recommendations and if the village board approves this, then one of the next steps is for the village to reach out to the town and try to establish a joint zoning committee. And that's really where you're going to have the zoning, any zoning that's going to occur or rezoning that would occur within the planning area. That's where the two parties get together. And so I'm not sure if I would use the word supersede, but it's essentially a step to try to get parties to work together.
Mr. President, this is John Brixey from the town of Blue Mountains. I'm a supervisor. Is there an opportunity for myself to make comment?
Yeah, you've got some feedback coming on. Really hard to understand you.
I don't believe so.
All right, try again. Now, yeah, it's better. Yes, try again.
All right. My name is John Brixey. I'm supervisor from the town of Blue Mountains.
Hi, John.
Good evening. Thank you for the opportunity. There are some facts already that are not correct that are brought in forward. The town of Blue Mountains, prior to the agreement of all the municipalities to build the Mount Horeb Fire District and Police Station, approached the village of Mount Horeb, asking them at that time to come to us and meet with us to meet for a boundary agreement. That was well over 3 years ago, 4 years ago almost at this point. So for someone to say that you reached out to us recently and we rebuffed you, that's just simply incorrect. 4 years ago, we came to you and we sought to form a committee to come to an agreement then before we went to any of our zoning, any of our opt-out, anything we had going on. So I think someone, your clerk or somebody needs to go back and check their records to correct that statement in the records tonight, that 4 years ago, the town of Blue Mountains reached out to the village of Mount Horeb to try and start a process that would be amicable to both parties.
Okay, if you don't mind, Nick, could you just address that briefly? I don't want to get into a he said, she said type of situation. I know what we have in front of us, but Nick, would you mind just responding, or Brian?
Yeah, I can respond to that. We did meet, I think there were 2 or 3 of us that went to a meeting with the town of Blue Mountains. We discussed some options. We were going to review plans together, and then it just never went any further than that. And I guess more specifically, recently, Randy and I sent a joint letter to Dennis Jelly, the town chair, asking if they wanted to resume those discussions. And he came and talked to me and said that they would not be interested in that.
Mr. Chairman?
The meeting with Dennis,
Yes, go ahead.
This
the
is Mark.
meeting with,
Town attorney.
Restate your name again, please.
This is Mark Hazelbaker, the attorney for the town of Blue Mounds.
Yes.
I just would make a few observations if I could. I appreciate your comment that he said, she said is not useful at this point. I suspect, as is often the case in these things, there is divergent views of what was said and what was understood. But the fact of the matter is, I work with the town of Blue Mounds. I was talking to Dennis Shelley earlier this morning, and I'm confident that the town understands and in fact feels very strongly that they're part of the same community that the village of Mount Horeb is. You guys need to work together. I think everybody is really ultimately concerned with the well-being of your shared school district, your shared businesses, your community institutions. There is definitely the understanding too that the village has certain powers if it chooses to exercise them. As a practical matter, this is an attention getter, and I'm pretty confident that it will have that effect. It already has. That's why I'm on this meeting tonight. I can tell you also, I represent the town of New Glarus, and they have had a long-standing, very positive relationship with the village of New Glarus, which involves extraterritorial zoning and land division review cooperatively. So it can work. You cited some other examples. I think the key is that we need to get together as soon as possible and start working on identifying shared issues and shared values and see if we can't put our mind to it. I understand where Supervisor Brixey was coming from. It never feels pleasant to have something adopted that tells you what you have to do or can do. Just, I'm sure if the situation were reversed, if the town were adopting an ordinance that restricts the village, I don't think you'd enjoy that either. So there definitely are going to be some feelings about it. But that said, I'm certainly hoping that we can work together. Thank you.
All right, Mark, thank you very much. I'm going to go back to Brian. Brian, would you like to respond to that? I don't want to get into legalese here in this meeting, but if you wouldn't mind responding as how you feel we should proceed.
Well, I mean, there's many things that Mr. Hazelbaker said that I agree with. I mean, I do agree that if you're able to reach a boundary agreement between a town and a village or a city, that is usually the best result for all parties. And you know, I'm not familiar with the discussions that have taken place up to this point. I'm not familiar with the discussions that you and Nick had that resulted in that letter. The other thing I would say is simply, you know, if the Village Plan Commission and the Village Board move forward tonight, that doesn't preclude those discussions from continuing to take place. I mean, I understand Mr. Hazelbaker's position that the town may not be excited about that, but it may light a fire under both parties, quite frankly, because you know that you have a deadline within which to get something done. And you know, this process of sitting down and having a discussion and trying to reach a mutual resolution, that can happen no matter what action the Plan Commission and the Village Board take tonight.
Nick, what are your thoughts on that? Do we need to take a step back? Do you want to take a step back? I'm not sure.
I think if the town's willing to enter a discussion on boundary agreements, I would be willing to take a step back and work on that before we go this angle. I think that's a good compromise with our neighboring community. And I think that was kind of the goal.
Yeah, it seems like that's, and Mark, I appreciate again your comments. It seems like maybe that is the way we should go. Do I have some other comments on that from the board or the Plan Commission?
Randy, this is Ryan Suzuki. Yeah, I think, you know, that's the best way to go. My only concern is what the risk is if it takes 6 to 12 months or longer to get a boundary agreement in place. What kind of risks are we having from the village for changes that may not fit within the future plans?
Well, I think we've already kind of addressed the time issue. We want to do something as soon as possible. So Mark, I don't know if you have permission to speak for the town, but would you agree that if we could meet as soon as possible, that we could kind of go forward with this and see what we're going to do?
I don't have explicit direction from the town on this point. I can only make the following observation, that you're going to be meeting again very soon, or you could schedule a special meeting very soon. So if there isn't a way to work through how we can thread the needle in a timely fashion, obviously you can put this back on the agenda. I do think that if you were to table the matter and perhaps postpone it to your first meeting in September, that would certainly allow us to have some discussions, take the temperature and see what's going on. I can tell you that I've been part of a number of discussions. I think most of you know that I have done a lot of work with towns in Dane County, and I was instrumental in getting the legislation passed that allowed towns to have their own zoning. We didn't do that because we wanted to destroy our adjacent villages. We did it because we couldn't stand working with Dane County. And that's a different, if you work with Dane County, you probably know what I mean. But be that as it may, the point is, yes, we can make some progress on this. I'm confident.
Mr. President, this is John Brixey again, if I might have an opportunity.
Yes, go ahead.
All right, I appreciate Mark Hazelbaker not speaking on her behalf, but I can speak on the board's behalf at this point. The board would agree to meet as soon as possible and practicable with any number or designated committee members or land use planning or board members you wish. We would hope you would bring forward very specific items that can be discussed. We don't want to just sit and have a general conversation. We want to know specifically what it is that the Village of Mount Horeb or the Planning Commission in Mount Horeb feels, I don't know, in some way endangered or threatened by the town of Blue Mountains having their own zoning, and allow us to either address those concerns or meet you halfway on these concerns or have a give and take on one point and another. Again, I think we can both stipulate that we both attempted to contact each other, and somewhere along the line we didn't interface very well. So if we would like to go for a third pitch on this and meet, we can meet most, well, as soon as practicable. I don't know how long it would take for you to establish who would form your committee and then what days they could get together, including everybody's business schedules or whatever, but I'm able to meet most any day. I believe the chairman's available to meet most any day. Our third member of our board is obviously a local farmer. He's in the vicinity most every day, so it's not a matter of any of us being out of town or anything like that.
Randy, Dave Hoffman from Plan Commission. No, I like the idea of tabling this, but what I don't like is kind of an open-ended ticket as to when we might make agreement. So I have a question for both Mark and for Brian. If the parties are willing to come to an agreement, is that something that you think they can do within 60 to 90 days?
I'll go for, I mean, I think it depends on how complex the agreement is. I mean, it's possible. I've seen it usually take a little bit longer than that, but you know, it depends on how complex the agreement's going to be.
And if I may chip in, you know, what often causes complexity in these discussions and sometimes makes them impossible is when the parties have very divergent views of where they're going. 25 years ago, I sat down with the planning director of the city of Madison on behalf of the town of Burke, and I said Burke would like a boundary agreement And his response was, we're not interested. We will have annexed you within the next 10 years. So, okay, well, that was a response. I don't think that's the situation here at all. The interests here are not entirely identical, of course, but they're very similar. And I think that there's grounds to do a couple of things. The first thing is to, as what John Brixey was saying, identify what the concerns the village and the Village Plan Commission have, and identify any immediate hot button issues. For example, there's a concern that something is about to happen, which we can talk about, to make sure that there isn't any urgency that requires immediate action. These decisions should be done and take the time that they need to take, and we should make sure that the interim doesn't disadvantage anybody. I also know that Supervisor Brixey and Supervisor Jelly and the town board members are good at negotiating, and I'm sure they can work something out.
Let me suggest this, see if all parties might agree to this. You could put the time parameters around it. Could we say that, for example, within 60 days, and this will put a little pressure on both sides, within 60 days, we would reach a go or no-go point as to whether or not negotiations are proceeding positively or negatively, at which point we could extend the negotiations to finalize them, or if we have reached an impasse by then, discuss where we are. But I think that would force, I think, both parties to put a bunch of meetings on the calendar to get down to work and try to hammer something out.
Dave, I think that's a good idea.
John Brixey.
Go ahead.
On behalf, I'll speak on behalf of the town board of Blue Mounds. We would stipulate to that presentation right there of 60 days, and at that point, both parties would know if we're headed in the right direction or not. Unless, again, as Councilor Hazelbaker stated, there is a singular hot button issue that needs to be addressed from the Village of Mount Horb's point of view. I have confidence that we could probably in less than that time, but at least that time, come to an agreement. Again, if the village is willing to bring their very specific issues from the beginning to the town, so we don't lose time in, having the ability to address those issues from our point of view.
Nick, would you be agreeable to that?
To the Dave suggestion, is that what you're talking about?
Yes.
I guess I'd have to give it a little more thought. That isn't something I was expecting when we came in. I just don't want to set a timeline that sets us up for failure.
This is Kathy. I'd like to make a comment.
Go ahead.
We're having all these kumbaya moments, and everyone's going to love it. I think we should proceed with what we intended to do tonight, because if all this love keeps continuing, this is not going to be a big deal to have this in place. If by some remote chance, one party or the other starts backing off or doesn't want to be involved in it, we have this for protection. We're all here. We all made this commitment to be at these meetings tonight. This was drafted and ready to go. I see no reason not to implement it. And we can carry on if you want to do the 60-day deal. Fine, that is all within the parameters of these documents. And it's just
so you're suggesting if we pass these, still continue with the negotiations or whatever we're doing with the town of Blue Mounds, correct?
Absolutely. These documents would serve as an umbrella of protection, and it would give both parties a timeline that we have to meet. So then we won't have any more of this he said, she said. I mean, it doesn't matter anymore because we have the documents in place.
I'm sorry, I didn't hear the name of the trustee or the council person who just spoke.
My name is Kathy with a C, Scott, S-C-O-T.
Thank you. Is it okay if I call you Kathy?
Absolutely. I've been called far worse.
Well, not by me. Kathy, with all due respect, I understand and appreciate the very, very conservative view that you've taken on this from your point, but I can only say that if that is the majority opinion of tonight, I can't help but believe this will just initially just poison the well from the very get-go. You're telling us from the very beginning by doing that you don't trust us, and if there's no trust, why have a negotiation?
Well, I'm not a legal.
I've never had you involved in any proceedings in my 10 years on the board. I don't know how long you've been on your board or your commission. Throughout the entire opt-out, I never heard any comment of any way, mostly from anyone from the village. Our views have always been out there. We held 60 public meetings when we were discussing our zoning, 5 years worth of public meetings. I think our track record of openness and willingness to address the people and residents of our community and anybody else who wanted to speak is already set in stone. And our track record is good. To my knowledge, we've done nothing previous or are currently doing nothing that endangers anything in the village of Mount Horeb. Again, that's why if there is a particular hot button issue that would force you to want to force this issue tonight, I would wish you would bring it up perhaps even right now, so at least we know what it is.
I have no hot button. I'm on the fire board, so I have worked with both the village and the town of Blue Mountains, and all the negotiations for the new building, as well as the old fire department sale. As far as my track record, I think I've been a trustee for 5 or 6 years. I just say how I feel, and just because I've expressed this feeling does not mean that but both the planning commission and the village board are going to agree with me or not.
Well, I appreciate your forthrightness.
Mr. Chairman?
Hey, Brian, could I get your opinion on this, please?
My opinion on what issue?
On how to proceed. I mean, my initial thought was we should just table this and then work with the town of Blue Mountains. Kathy brought up something different. I mean, is there any rhyme or reason to do one or the other?
Well, I mean, there obviously is a little bit of there's a risk to the village if all of a sudden, you table this and you find out that now land that is in the ETJ or extraterritorial zoning area is now going to be rezoned by the town in a fashion that would be problematic for the village. That's the risk. It's really a policy decision at this point. I mean, I think I've heard, and I don't want to, if I mischaracterize this, please let me know. I mean, I think I've heard the town basically, say, if the village goes ahead and adopts the resolution and adopts the ordinance, that's then a sign that the village doesn't trust the town, and that would, I think, poison the process. And I guess I could understand where the town's coming from on that. I think the flip side is also true that, and I would assume, or I would hope that if the board and the planning commission do not go ahead right away and go ahead right now and do this, that the town is going to reciprocate and not do something immediate that would be problematic for the village, because that would certainly poison the well pretty significantly. And so I think it kind of comes down to, are you at a point where you want to trust and work with the town, or do you want to push ahead with this? And the only other thing I want to address is, and I think Nick might have been touching on this, I'm all in, if we assume for a minute that the Plan Commission and the Village Board are going to table this item because of the information that's been provided from the town tonight and the desire to try to work to some type of mutual resolution, I'm all in favor of having, doing this as quickly as possible. I would just be leery of any specific hard timelines. To the extent that I'm going to be involved, I need to get up to speed with, what it is exactly the village is looking to do. And, there's definitely the potential that the first meeting between the two parties, whether it's just at a staff level or at a staff level, and there's going to be some committee members and board members involved, that may not occur for another 14 days, for example. I mean, that's definitely a possibility, because I understand the town's position of, hey, if we're going to sit down and talk, let's not just, let's get some specifics together. And, Mike, I would say that, I think, I don't want to step out of turn here. I'm guessing that Mike's worked on some from boundary agreements himself, and so he may have some ideas that are either consistent with or similar to mine, or maybe he's got a different viewpoint. But there's a risk if you don't move ahead tonight, but there's also a risk if you do move ahead tonight, if your ultimate goal is to try to reach some type of mutual resolution.
Mr. Chairman.
All right. Thank you. Who's that?
Mark Hazelbaker.
Yeah,
Mark? Yes.
Sir, I think that what Attorney Kleinmeyer said is true, that there's always risk when you hold off adopting an ordinance. But I would make the comment that since you're dealing with a town which doesn't have sewer and doesn't have TIF and doesn't have a lot of the ability to do rapid and significant development that a city or a village would, and I'm not aware that it has any major projects in the zoning pipeline right now. If somebody came along and said, hey, we want to put a zoo on the edge of Mount Horeb, you'd hear about it. You'd have the opportunity to put it back on the agenda and adopt this an ordinance before it got out of hand. So I guess I'm asking because I think it serves to send a neighborly signal to table it with the understanding that you could put it back on the agenda on 24 hours notice if that's what's required because of circumstances. I think that is the best thing to do. We all remember, or at least I think almost all of us remember the horrible situation that happened between DeForest and Windsor in the 1990s and early 2000s. Literally millions of dollars got spent on attorney's fees. That's not going to happen here because neither of you have that kind of money to spend, although they didn't either. But we don't need animosity. And the village is a great place. I like the village of Mount Horeb a lot. I like town of Blue Mountains. You guys have so much in common. You're going to work this out. Thank you.
Okay.
All right, thank you.
To address Mark's recent comment, saying that that it'll cause, if something happens, we're going to put a zoo at the end on our borderline or whatever it may be, then we could immediately meet again and do this, and then there'll really be animosity on our part. Why not eliminate all this potential animosity and just put a legal document in force? I mean, it's been said, towns have done it many times. They go on, life goes on, and nobody's around pouting. This isn't a child's game. Just have it in force, and that's the way it is. Then we're all guaranteed that we're going to act like adults and have meetings and get things organized within the time period specified in the documents.
All right, Kathy, you'll get your chance. Yep, you'll get your chance in item 5. I'm going to move to item 3. Plan Commission, consider recommendation for resolution 2020-23 regarding extraterritorial zoning over a portion of the town of Blue Mountains. Does anyone else in the Plan Commission have some thoughts on this? Do you want to table? Do you want to move ahead? I will leave that up to the Plan Commission. Go ahead, Dave. I'm sorry.
Yeah. I'm hearing Mr. Hazelbaker saying that he believes that in a short period of time we can get something done, and I'm also hearing Brian say that he doesn't want to be held to a timeline. But and then Kathy is saying that we ought to pass this tonight. If we pass it tonight, that still doesn't set a process in motion. And I guess I just want to go back and kind of underline what I said before. If both parties can agree to at least a memorandum or a joint resolution that they will move ahead within the next 60 days to identify the issues that are in dispute. I mean, that basically is going to tell us within 60 days whether or not we're going to have an agreement or not. If we have issues in dispute that can't be resolved, it's probably going to be time to pull the string on this ordinance. But I would think that even if it takes 14 days to bring everybody up to speed, we ought to know what's on everybody's mind and what's important to both entities within 60 days. If you want to go 90 days, that's fine with me. I mean, the lawyers can make that call. But I think we should set a process, in motion rather than just table it.
Randy, this is Nick. I'm not sure we can set a process for this at this meeting. The agenda is specifically for the extraterritorial zoning. So I don't think we can take action on a process like that.
All right, thank you, Nick. Would it be feasible, just a recommendation that yourself and Brian make up an agreement, perhaps with a timeline, starting whenever, if you can do that agreement? I understand what we have in front of us. Would that be feasible to just have that direction from the Plan Commission?
I think we can take direction from the Plan Commission. There is nothing on the agenda that will allow action outside of the specific agenda items that are on there.
Correct. So what I just offered was a suggestion to Nick and yourself, Brian. Plan Commission, I would move to table this item for now, and then we can always bring it back. So I move to table. Is there a second?
This is Peggy. I will second.
Oh, Peggy seconded. Any further comments?
Is there any matters of urgency behind this that we should be aware of before we make a decision?
There's nothing urgent on our end. I think we just wanted to get the ball rolling to start these discussions.
Then I think that's what we've done. Any further discussion from the Plan Commission?
Can we talk about?
All right, I will. Go ahead.
Can we talk about tabling until when? You've moved to table. Do you have an idea how long we're just leaving the tabling open-ended?
I would be table open-ended. We could have a meeting in another week. We could have a meeting in 2 days. I think it would be open-ended. Would that make sense, Nick?
Yeah, that makes sense.
All right, with that, any other further discussion from the Plan Commission? All right, since we are online here, I will call for a roll call vote. This is to move to table.
Okay, I'll call the roll. Randy Little,
Yes.
Aaron Bainan,
Yes.
Dave Hoffman,
Yes.
Destiny Udelhoven,
Yes.
Brent
Brent
Yakler.
might be on. Brent might
Yes.
be on now? Okay.
Did you hear me?
And
Yes.
yeah, I heard you, Brent. And Peggy Zaluka?
Yes.
All right, so item 3 is tabled. We're going to move to item 4, Plan Commission. Consider recommendation for ordinance 2020-14, an ordinance creating section 17.201 of the municipal code, an interim extraterritorial zoning ordinance within the town of Blue Mounds. Do I have a motion?
Brian, do we have to act on this one since we tabled the last one?
Oh, good question.
I mean, I would say this. I mean, this is ultimately a decision by the village board. I'm sure the recommendation by the Plan Commission is significant, but to the extent that you're going to move on to items 5 and 6 on the agenda, which you certainly can't, you know, that's really going to be up to the board on how it wants to move forward. I do think that you should have, I assume the vote's going to be the same on number 4 that it was on the 3, but I would suggest that you do make a motion.
All right, thank you. I'm sorry, was there a motion? I'll move to table. Is there a second?
This is Brent, I'll second.
All right, I will ask for a roll call vote again.
Randy Little,
Yes.
Aaron Bainan,
Yes.
Dave Hoffman,
Yes.
Destiny Udelhoven,
Yes.
Brent Yakler,
Yes.
and Peggy Zaluka.
Yes.
All right, thank you. We'll move to item 5, the Village Board. Consider Resolution 2020-23 regarding extraterritorial zoning over a portion of the town of Blue Mounds. Same process. Do I have a motion? You already know the Plan Commission recommendation is to table. I'll motion to table. Is there a second?
I'll second. Brent?
Are you on the village board?
No, Brent, this is for Village
Oh,
Board.
I'm sorry.
No, that's
very
okay.
sorry about that. Yep, I
That's
recall
all right.
what I just said.
We need a second from the Village Board to table. Hearing none, the motion dies. Again, consider Resolution 2020-23 regarding extraterritorial zoning over a portion of the town of Blue Mounds. You have the recommendation from the Plan Commission. I will open it up for discussion.
This is Jason. I have another question for Brian, kind of a follow-up on everything we've been talking about. If the board were to approve the resolution and the ordinance tonight, and we were to continue discussions with the town, if we were to reach a fruitful discussion and resolution, could the village board rescind the resolution and the ordinance and return things to the status quo where they are today without having, essentially nullifying the resolution and ordinance and restoring both parties to where they are right now?
Well, I guess my answer to that is kind of twofold. I mean, if you were to adopt the resolution, adopt the ordinance, what the statute anticipates then is we're going to have a joint zoning committee created with the goal of establishing zoning, you know, within the extraterritorial area, and then processes that relate to that. And so the zoning could theoretically just stay the same that it is now and just be implemented as part of the joint zoning committee process, or it could be changed. And then, I mean, the other outcome is at some point in time, if the village board decided, I mean, the village board always has the ability to rescind the ordinance during the 2-year period. But if it's successful, and the town and the village are able to work together after the ordinance is adopted, I think more likely than not, it's not necessarily that the ordinance would be rescinded. It's just that the parties work collectively together to create, you know, similar or new zoning for the extraterritorial area.
And how does that differ from a boundary agreement?
Well, you know, for example, not all boundary agreements necessarily result in extraterritorial zoning for, you know, the village and with its town. I mean, that is, you know, now we're starting to get into details, you know, exactly what would come out from the boundary agreement and potentially how we would end up with changed zoning. Honestly, I'm not in a position to comment on that right now. I would need to have further discussions with the village about that and with Nick about that.
Okay, I just wanted some clarification. If the village board did vote to approve, you know, whether that forces us into one path, or we could go back to revisit a boundary agreement. That was the main source of my question.
Okay.
Other comments from the village board?
My question, this is Kathy, my question is, we didn't get a motion to consider it. So what happens if nothing is said, or if we want to if we want to implement the documents that we prepared, do we then make a motion to consider them on the positive note? How do you do that? A motion wasn't.
I would say, I mean, if the board is inclined to adopt the resolution and to adopt the ordinance, somebody would, you know, first we would, on agenda item number 5, somebody would make a motion to approve the resolution. If there was a second, we would have a vote on that, and then depending on what happened with that vote, that necessarily leads to item number 6.
Okay, I will make the motion to consider resolution 20-23 regarding extraterritorial zoning over a portion of the town of Blue Mounds.
Well, and can I just clarify? I mean, Nick, correct me if I'm wrong, but when we have consider you know, that's typically been part of the village board agenda where that's action. Is that accurate?
Nick?
You're muted, I think.
You're on.
Yes, that's correct. If it's on there for consideration, it's on for action.
So I think if you're going to make a motion to, it's not a motion to consider it, it's a motion to approve the resolution.
Okay, I was simply reading off the agenda. Okay, I make a motion to approve the resolution 2023 regarding extraterritorial zoning over a portion of the town of Blue Mountains.
Is there a second?
This is Beth, I'll second.
Roll call vote, please.
Randy Little,
No.
Aaron Bainan,
Can I ask a question? Sorry. Could we
Go
make
ahead.
it contingent? Could we make it contingent on maybe even Nick Owens' ability to, like his instant ability to rescind it, terminate it upon success, you know, successful discussion with Blue Mountains? Sorry for not articulating that well. Could we add a provision to this that it could be instantly resolved with Nick's authority instead of even a whole nother special session?
I think it would have to come back to the board.
Okay.
If you're going to rescind, if you approve it and then the idea of rescinding it, I think you would, to rescind it, I think it would have to come back to the board.
Which could come back anytime within 24 hours notice.
I would say yes.
okay. Ryan Zazuski? He may have left. Jason Fendrick?
Yes.
Beth Hill?
Yes.
All right, I believe motion passes, correct?
Oh, hold on, Randy. We have to ask Kathy first. Kathy Scott?
Yes.
Oh, I'm sorry.
Yeah, just slow down.
Sorry, Kathy. All right, so item 5 passes. Let's move to item 6. Village Board, consider ordinance 2020-14, an ordinance creating section 17.201 of the municipal code, an interim extraterritorial zoning ordinance within the town of Blue Mountains. Do I have a motion?
This is Jason. I'll move to approve the ordinance.
I'll second.
All right, then we will, any further discussion? We'll need a roll call vote, please.
Randy Little?
To be consistent with Plan Commission, no.
Aaron Bainan?
I guess inconsistent, yes.
Do I say Ryan again? Ryan Suzuki? Jason Fendrick?
Yes.
Beth Hill?
Yes.
And Kathy Scott?
Yes.
All right, motion passes. Thank you. Item 7, adjournment. Until 7 o'clock for the Plan Commission. Is there a motion?
I'll move.
I'll second.
All in favor?
Aye.
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 All right,
Was it
thanks,
Kathy
everyone.
and Beth?
Yeah.